Call to order at 5:03, roll call. Brett Castillo.
Here.
Butch Cole.
Here.
Caroline Eisenkamp. Here. Stefan Jacobsala. Deskla.
Yeah, here. Thank you.
And Julie Lambert. Present. And Raymond Zeno is not going to be joining us tonight as a committee member. He'll be on listening as a member of the public. And that is due to the fact that he was to be attending from a location in San Antonio, Texas, as we have noticed here on the agenda, and he did not make it there. He is in progress in travel and will be joining us from Phoenix Airport. So, great, thank you for joining, and we will leave your comments and questions for the public comment section of the meeting.
Perfect, thanks, Rosie. Any modifications or changes to the agenda today? None? Okay. All right, so before we get to the regular part of our agenda, I will seek any public comment from members of the public on matters not on tonight's agenda.
We do not have anyone online or in the audience.
Okay.
Aside from Mr. Casino.
Right. Okay. Any comments from members of the committee before we get started? Okay. Thanks for dealing us with our formalities. So I will then move us on to discussion item number 1. This is really just a welcome and introduction. So thank you all so much for doing this. This is a labor of love to volunteer your time for our local healthcare district, and we really appreciate it. Your oversight and your understanding of what we're doing with our bond money that has come to us as a result of voter approval, and what we're how we're spending those money. Is important that we have that oversight to make sure we are fulfilling the promises that we made, the district made to the public when we did that. So we really appreciate having you all here. This committee, as you'll hear more about from our legal representation, Noelle and Jennifer on the call here, we'll talk a little bit more in a bit about the committee responsibilities. So I won't preview that one too much, but really you're here to make sure that we're seeing through the promises that were made and that we're spending those dollars, that we have spent those dollars appropriately. So I appreciate all of your interest, and I appreciate your expertise. You've been selected among a number of other people who were also interested. And we feel like we've got a really solid group of people with some great experience that will help us make sure we're doing this right. So thank you very much. Legal counsel, any other relevant information for this particular topic? Noelle? No? Okay. Any questions or comments from the committee members on my welcome and introduction? Going through my script that Rosie's given me. Any comments from the public on the side?
On the line. Oh, I do have
Ray.
All right, yes, Ray.
Yeah, since I'm a guest, I have to, adhere to the appropriate times to speak. So just excited to work with everyone on the committee and to kind of shepherd the spending of the community dollars and the manner in which it was voted on. So look forward to meeting you all in purpose. And again, apologies for the mix-up.
Thanks, Greg. We're looking forward to having you. All right, I'll close out item number 1 and move on to item number 2, appointment of initial officers. So for this, we will have a chair and a vice chair of the committee that will be able to do this part that I'm doing now, and helping run the committee meetings, and also helping decide how we will present back to the district board when this committee has reports back to the board on the work that's being done here. Noelle comments or input on item number 2, appointment of initial officers?
I don't think so. The initial round will be appointment, and then after that will be election by the committee. So this is kind of just what you're going to be doing on the first go round, and the CEO has the ability to appoint, and so that's within your discretion on this go round.
And by this go around, we're talking about this calendar year, and then for next calendar year, the committee will then vote for the new chair and vice chair. Is that right?
Exactly. Yeah, it's just because this is the very first one. Very first meeting.
One. We'll have 2 meetings this calendar year, right?
Right, and at our next meeting, we will actually take that vote for next calendar year.
For the 2026 calendar year. Perfect. Any questions from the committee on that process? Okay. I have looked through the names, and I've talked to at least one person already ahead of time. Sorry, I didn't talk to others ahead of time. And my appointment ahead of time, I would like to ask Ray Cancino to be our chair of the committee. And I would like to ask Caroline if you're willing to be our vice chair. If you're willing. And what that means is, because Ray is not here today, that you would actually be chair of today's committee. But vice chair for the next one, later on this year. And so I guess the first question is if you'd be willing to do that.
Let me just ask about what, chair and vice chair, what are the responsibilities outside of running the meeting? Are there additional meetings we have to attend, or mostly email agenda?
There should not be any additional meetings. Noel, any other input?
I'm gonna punt this to Jennifer.
Yeah,
Go,
sure.
perfect.
Yeah, as the chair, really your biggest role will be to preside over meetings in the absence of the chair, like at what is happening tonight. But there's no extra meetings that you'll have to attend or anything like that. It really will just kind of be the backup to preside over the meetings if Ray can't make it.
Okay. Yeah, that's fine.
Thank you.
You get an annotated agenda that tells you what to do, like I just.
Everything in front of it, is that me?
Yeah, so you know, when someone's out of order, when we're done.
Any other questions from the committee on that? Otherwise, I'll go to public comment on this item. Any public comment on this item?
No hands, no participants online.
All right. Then we will put that into the minutes, please, Rosie, as our chair and vice chair for this initial one. And again, as Rosie mentioned, at the next meeting, we'll be able to, the committee will be able to nominate and then vote on the chair and vice chair for the 2026 calendar year. Okay.
Okay. So my steps for item 3 here.
Correct.
Yes,
Okay.
please.
So this is an overview of the Brown Act and committee responsibilities and legal counsel presentation of the Brown Act and bond oversight committee responsibilities, and that's Noel and Jennifer. Legal counsel.
Perfect.
I do have your presentation, Jennifer, but Noel, I think you're gonna present and drive yours, correct?
Yeah, I was gonna share my screen. Let me see.
Can I do something out of order that I should have done when we started, and I apologize, I know that I'm not supposed to go out of order, but I didn't introduce the two wonderful people sitting to my right.
Sure.
Julie Peterson is our chief financial officer, and Jessica Dixon is our controller. As this is very much overseeing the finances of what we're doing, these folks are integrally important in everything that we do with the hospital and the district, and obviously in this meeting. And so apologies for not introducing them at the outset.
Great, thank you.
Perfect. All right. So thank you very much for having us today. Welcome to the committee, and I echo Steve's comments. It's a really important job that you have, and they're very glad to have a group of individuals who look committed to their responsibilities as part of the oversight committee. So my part of the presentation is really kind of the boring part, to give you a first look at the Brown Act and the transparency laws that are important in terms of being part of a committee that's part of a public agency. And then Jennifer will give you the more exciting part of the presentation that tells you kind of what you get to do and what you're looking at and all that good fun stuff. So don't fall asleep during my presentation. And I'm hoping to give you at least enough information that you can issue spot and give you some resources. And then always, if you have questions, we're always here to help answer those. So is that switching on your screen when yes, perfect. Okay, so just a little bit about BBK and our law firm. All right, so the oops, so let me see. So the presentation, I'm going to give you a little history of the Brown Act, then the purpose of the Brown Act, some applications so you can do some issue spotting, some examples of serial meetings. That's where we find that people get caught up the most on what is and is not allowed, some rules governing meetings, some ideas on closed sessions, and then some remedies and cures. So really interesting, in late 1951, there was a Chronicle, San Francisco Chronicle reporter named Mike Harris, and he spent 6 weeks looking into the way that local agencies conducted meetings. And there was already some sort of transparency sunshine laws out there, but they were either being ignored or they weren't strong enough. And so what he found was that many times there were meetings that were happening and the public had no idea what was going on. They were excluded from meetings. They didn't get notice of when a meeting was going to happen. And so he brought his findings back, and his findings were disturbing to the legislatures because they wanted these to be open and transparent meetings. And so Assembly Member Ralph M. Brown carried legislation on the law that we now know as the Brown Act. So the purpose of the Brown Act really is to work in conjunction with the California Public Records Act to promote transparency in local government. So the Public Records Act applies to documents that a public agency might generate or look at, that the public has a right to look at when they relate to the public's business. The Brown Act ensures that meetings are also, for the most part, open to the public so they can see how the deliberative process works with their elected officials. So the Brown Act applies to local agencies. So those are public agencies that have an elected board, or a city or a town, a school district. Many of you probably have seen school district meetings, municipal corporations, and special districts like the healthcare district are all covered under the Brown Act. The Brown Act covers the governing body, which is the board of the district, and it also includes committees that are formed by the board. And that's why this committee is also subject to the Brown Act. So generally, the Brown Act applies to meetings, and the purpose is to make sure that board members or committee members are not deliberating about a topic outside the view of the public. So it defines a gathering to be a majority of the members at the same time and place, hearing, discussing, deliberating on any matter under their jurisdiction. So you have 6 members of your committee. So it would be 3, or I guess 4 or more would be considered a majority. So no action needs to be taken in order for a meeting to occur. conversations between and among members of the legislative body about issues confronting the agency is sufficient. So it's not like you have to have a vote. You could be talking about an issue behind the scenes, and that would also trigger the Brown Act. So basically, the public wants to see how you deliberate and how you come to conclusions that are in front of the public agency. So things that are not a meeting, individual contacts with constituents. So people in your district that might want to talk to you about how money's being spent, you can have that individual contact without it being a Brown Act meeting. Conferences and seminars that are open to the public, you all could attend there. Community meetings like a Chamber of Commerce meeting, a purely social or ceremonial meeting, a ribbon cutting of a new hospital or a new facility or a new service, you all could attend without it being considered a meeting. And appearing at a meeting of another legislative body. So you could go to a city council meeting or something like that, as long as you're not sitting in the back discussing agency business. Okay, serial meetings are an area that is fraught with problems because people don't realize that they're doing it. And they're expressly prohibited because they go against the doctrine of a majority of you discussing something outside of a meeting. And so it's defined in the Brown Act as use of direct communication, personal intermediaries, or technological devices, your phone, text, email, employed by a majority of the legislative body members in order to develop a collective concurrence as to action to be taken on an item by the legislative body. So that's what's prohibited. So let me give you some examples. So it would be a series of communications between less than a quorum that then involves a majority of the committee. And it either advances or clarifies the understanding of an issue. It facilitates an agreement or compromise between members, and it advances the ultimate resolution of an issue. How are you going to vote on this? What are you thinking about this? Have you heard about this? Those types of things. So there's generally two types of serial meetings. One that we call a chain or a daisy chain, where member A speaks to member B, and then member B speaks to member C about a particular matter. And in the process, they all form a collective concurrence on the matter. So even though they weren't in a meeting like you are today, they nevertheless had a majority of people talking about the same item. Or there's what we call the hub and the spoke, where an intermediary, someone in the middle, acts as the hub of the wheel, with members relaying information back and forth to each other through the hub. And in the process, a majority of the legislative body develops a collective concurrence. The ways serial meetings can happen: a personal meeting, telephone, email. Email is the most common way that we see nowadays because it's so easy to forward and reply to emails. Written correspondence, use of intermediaries, and social networking sites on Facebook or Twitter, where people do a thumbs up or comment, and a majority of people comment on the same matter. So here's a good example. A phone call was from a lobbyist. Say, I need your vote for that project in the South area. How about it? Well, I don't know, replied board member Alietto. That's kind of a sticky proposition. Are you sure you need my vote? Well, I've got Bradley and Cohen lined up, and another vote leaning. With you, I'd be over the top. Moments later, the phone rings again. Hey, I've been hearing some rumbles on that South area project, said the newspaper reporter. I'm counting noses. How are you voting on it? The lobbyist and the reporter are facilitating a violation of the Brown Act. The board member may have violated the Brown Act by hearing about the positions of the other members and indeed coaxing the lobbyist to reveal the other board members' positions by asking, "Are you sure you need my vote?" The prudent course of action is to avoid such leading conversations and to caution lobbyists, staff, and news media against revealing such positions of others. So you can see how easy it is to fall into the trap. Nothing purposeful was done, just an unawareness of the Brown Act and its application. So there are some exceptions to the serial meeting. And one of them, an important one, is one-on-one communications by a non-member like staff with members of the legislative body. So it doesn't mean a back and forth and a sharing of views or of different members, but it allows a communication or call to schedule a special meeting. Or that's another exception, a communication or call to schedule a special meeting. So for example, Rosie talked to probably all of you to see when you were available to come to this meeting. Example 2, the CEO meets before each board meeting with each board member to discuss the agenda. Is this an unlawful serial meeting? No, this is a lawful practice, and it's actually done quite a lot. The Act expressly provides that substantive briefings of members of the legislative body by staff are permissible as long as staff does not communicate the comments or positions of members to any other members. So it's possible that Steve would call each individual member and say, committee member, and say, this is what's going to be on the agenda. This is what we're doing about this. This is what we're hearing in the community about that. And it's a one-way communication. Where there would be an issue would be if a committee member then asked Steve, so how is committee member A feeling about this? How is committee member B feeling about this? Because then it's a two-way and you're soliciting information on how other committee members may be feeling about an item. Example 3. The mayor sat down across from the city manager. From now on, he declared, I want you to provide individual briefings on upcoming agenda items. Some of the material is very technical, and the council members don't want to sound like idiots asking about it in public. Besides that, briefings will speed up the meeting. Agency employees or officials may have separate conversations or communications outside of an open and notice meeting with members of the legislative body in order to answer questions or provide information regarding a matter that is within the subject matter jurisdiction of the local agency. If that person does not communicate to members of the legislative body the comments or position of any other member or members of the legislative body. Members should always be vigilant when discussing local agency business with anyone to avoid conversations that could lead to a discussion, deliberation, or action taken among the majority of the legislative body. Thanks for the information, said Council Member Kim. These zoning changes can be tricky, and now I think I'm better equipped to make the right decision. Glad to be of assistance, replied the planning director. I'm sure Council Member Jones is okay with these changes. How are you leaning? Well, said Council Member Kim, I'm leaning toward approval. I know that 2 of my colleagues definitely favor approval. And that's where things went off the rails. The planning director should not disclose Jones's prospective vote, and Kim should not disclose the prospective votes of 2 colleagues. Under these facts, there likely has been a serial meeting in violation of the Brown Act. So as I mentioned, email is one of the most common ways that a serial meeting can happen without anybody really understanding or intending to have a Brown Act violation. So sometimes you'll get an correspondence that goes to all committee members at the same time. You'll want to refrain from doing a reply all to that email. You could reply individually to staff. Usually it would come from staff. But you should not do a reply all. Best not to take a position or make a comment in an email. And email board members for information only. So best practice is for someone like Rosie to send those types of email instead of board members emailing each other about things. Social media can also be somewhat problematic if it's found that there is a discussion of a majority of the members on social media. So like thumbs up and things like that can tend to cause a problem. Again, the meeting doesn't have to be in a physical location. And nowadays, there's so much commenting on, I guess maybe I'm showing my age. It's not really Facebook anymore. It might be Twitter or X or Instagram or something like that. But just being careful about having any comments on that type of social media. So here are some of the rules about social media so that you can look back at this when you're trying to get a handle on what this means. So district officials may engage in separate conversations or communicate on social media platforms to answer questions, provide information to the public, or solicit information from the public regarding district business. However, a district official may not do either of the following on a social media platform. So a discussion by a majority, discuss district business with a majority of members of the same legislative bodies. That includes communicating, posting, sharing, commenting, or using digital icons. Or direct responses, respond directly to another member's communication, comment, or post if there are two on the same legislative body of the district and the topic concerns the district business. So rules governing meetings. So they're generally regular meetings, special meetings, emergency meetings, adjourned meetings. And in every meeting, the public has a right to comment. So regular meetings generally have a 72-hour posting requirement. They include the time and location of the meeting. They contain a brief general description of each item to be discussed, including closed session items, and they usually have notices about how ADA alternative formats could be available. So each of you probably has a paper copy of the agenda that Rosie posted, and that was also posted on the district's website. You'll notice on the agenda there was a portion that allowed the public to comment. So that happens at every meeting. There are time limits usually that get put on that so that meetings don't go until midnight. There are rules regarding that, but there is some latitude for bilingual speakers who may need some translation assistance, and they get a little bit longer time usually to comment to take into account that translation. So then we have special meetings. Those are normally posted 24 hours before the meeting. They also have to include the time and the location of the meeting, and also a general brief description of what's going to be addressed at the meeting. Adjourned meetings. This doesn't happen very often, but sometimes there could be an issue that goes a really long time and it's midnight or 1 a.m. and everybody's tired and you want to go home, and there is the ability to adjourn that meeting to a new date, provided it's less than 5 days away. You don't have to post another agenda, and provided it only addresses what was on the original agenda. I very rarely see this happen. Emergency meetings, I also very rarely see happen because they really require a severe impairment to public health and safety. So think of a wildfire or something like that. Those may give rise to an emergency meeting, but generally the 24-hour notice for the special meeting can handle just about anything that kind of comes up urgently. As a general rule, the meetings need to be within the agency's jurisdictional boundaries. I get questions about strategic planning sessions in cool places like Maui. Unfortunately, those can't be done. Okay, the public right to comment. At every regular meeting, members of the public have the right to directly address the body on any item of public interest that's under the jurisdiction of the body. For agenda items, the public must be given the opportunity to also comment on the agenda items. So you'll note that when Steve was going through the agenda items, he also asked on each individual item whether there was any comment by the public. On special meetings, the comments are a little narrower and they only deal with things on the agenda, whereas a regular meeting can be done pretty much with anything that's in the jurisdiction. And the public can't be required to state their name. They can be asked for their name, but they can't be required to state it. One of the hardest things to get used to is that there's no ability to discuss or take action on an item that's not on your agenda, but that maybe came up in an emergent way right before the meeting. So the rules on that are pretty strict. Sometimes things are allowed to be added to the agenda, but they require certain findings that they had come up at the last minute. They weren't known about before the agenda was posted, and they have to be dealt with. It doesn't help solve just forgetting to put something on the agenda. The other item that I run into a lot is responding to public comment. The committee members have no obligation to engage in a back and forth dialogue with the public. The public really is there to voice their opinion and to allow the committee to hear items that are of importance to them. But the committee does not have to engage in a back and forth dialogue. And in fact, if the public is bringing up things that are not even on the agenda, then there really shouldn't be any discussion about that anyway. But it's an opportunity for you to hear what the public is concerned about and what's important to the public. Okay, there is the ability to have certain items discussed in closed session. They have to be expressly authorized under the law. They do have to be described in the agenda so that the public knows they're going to be a closed session item about it. They have to be verbally announced before you go into closed session. Sometimes action is taken in a closed session and that needs to be reported out. And it's really very narrow when the public is better served by a closed session. And the easiest way to think about that is, for example, like a real estate negotiation or a litigation strategy. Probably nothing that this committee ever is going to run into, but something where there really is the need for a closed session discussion because otherwise the public agency would be disadvantaged. So examples are real property transactions, litigation, personnel issues, labor negotiations, things this committee is really not going to be involved with, but nevertheless, it's out there and I wanted to make you aware of that. There's specific language that has to be put into the agenda, specific wording and all that. You also have to allow the public to comment before closed sessions. And those who are allowed in the closed session is the very small circle. It would be the committee members and maybe some selective staff. There's also some strict confidentiality that relates to closed session discussions. And unauthorized disclosure of what happened in a closed session is actionable. It actually can be reported to the Attorney General. So this is just remedies for disclosure. Again, I don't think you're going to really run into this, but I wanted to make you aware of it. Okay. Violations. Sometimes stuff just happens, right? You didn't realize, and then later on you're like, oops, this was not good. This was potentially a violation of the Brown Act. there's a way to cure that. The law realizes that public agencies are made up of individuals who are humans and stuff happens sometimes. And so there's a way to cure it on the front end, and just take action, have something discussed in open. And then if there's an action taken, take that in open. Or sometimes you'll get a letter from the public complaining that there was a Brown Act violation, and you have the opportunity to cure it. So all is not lost if there is potentially a Brown Act violation. So I always like to remind my boards and committees, working with the public is difficult because you are working in a fishbowl, you're under the microscope. Sometimes people are very happy with what you're doing. Sometimes they're not so happy with what you're doing. Meetings can be very vocal at times, but you just want to keep that level of formality. It is a public setting, respect for everybody's opportunity to speak, stick to the agenda, manage the time as best as you can, hear public comment before any deliberation, make sure you're listening, you're not texting during meetings, you're really paying attention. The public sees things like that, and they are aware of things like that. So just be thoughtful on how you advocate for a policy or an action. Don't publicly attack or criticize staff. There's a lot of stuff that goes on in the background to prepare for a meeting. To get the board packets all together. It's really a lot of work. And the staff really should be commended for what they do. Don't micromanage, staff is there to help you, and to make your lives as easy as possible so that you can do your job, as committee members. And there's this fabulous resource guide. It's called Open and Public 6, A Guide to the Ralph M. Brown Act. You can find it at that website that's here in this slide. More than you ever wanted to know about the Brown Act, but written for non-lawyers and very, very useful. So if you ever have any questions or you want to look something up, this is what I give to all my clients and tell them this is really a good resource. And I think this slide should be in your packet, so you should have that. Okay, I'm going to stop sharing now. So there we go. So does anybody have any questions? I bored you all to death.
We do have one hand up, Noel.
Oh, okay, sure.
Hi, Noel. This is Julie.
Hi, Julie.
What is our duty to report a potential violation if we think we've messed up on something?
So my recommendation would be first that you would call Steve or Rosie, and then they can get us looped in, and then we kind of look at it and say, is this something that we think we need to fix? And again, it's not the end of the world. I don't want you to be scared that you think that, oh my gosh, I'm going to be thrown in jail and an orange jumpsuit doesn't look good on me. There's usually always a way to fix things. So that's who I'd start with. I'd start with Steve, and then he can get us looped in if needed. Does that help?
Thank you.
Sure. Anyone else? Oh, hi, Ray. Yes.
Well, I wanted to wait until public comment, but if it's okay to ask a question now, since we're going to be hopefully some of us will be at the Watsonville Hospital fundraiser. How do we, besides saying only 2 people can go or less than the majority can go, which is a common practice, what other ways, can we kind of support the hospital and at the same time, keep our nose clean to the act?
Absolutely. So that's one of those ceremonial exceptions. So you all can come, and I'm actually going to be there too. So if you're all there, I'll introduce myself to you. You just need to be careful that you're not sitting in a back corner somewhere talking about district business. But absolutely, yes, you can all be there. Does that help?
Yes, it does. I just wanted to make sure everyone was aware of that.
Yeah. Yeah. And then there is the ability to appear remotely, and Rosie knows all those rules on how that can be done. So it's been relaxed somewhat since COVID. So if members are unable to attend in person, there is that ability. It's never, it's nice to be there in person, but sometimes things come up and there is the ability to do that. So you should just reach out to Rosie and she can help with that.
Sorry, well, you were breaking up a bit, but I think what you were covering was the exception for remote attendance in the case of a illness and the restrictions or the requirements around that, I should say, and how they are able to attend remotely. Is that for your discussion?
Yeah, so there are exceptions if you're ill, if you have a family emergency, or if you just so happen to be out of town. As long as the majority of you are in the district, if there are people who are out of town, they can appear remotely by teleconference. There's some steps that have to be taken, so you'd need to let Rosie know as soon as possible.
As soon as possible.
I have a question. Outside of discussing anything that has to do with the Appropriations Committee and decisions or opinions, is it all right to express your opinion in the local newspaper about other operations that have to do with operations or things like that?
Yeah, you just need to be very careful that you don't have your committee member hat on. And that's where sometimes you can get in trouble because the public knows that you're a member of the committee, right? And so you as just one individual can't speak for the committee as a whole. But you do have your First Amendment right to make comments. So that's where you need to be careful that you're not getting yourself in trouble and speaking for the committee as a whole. Does that answer your question?
Yes, it did. Thank you.
Yeah. Okay. Was there one more question? Nope. I don't know whether that was a stretch or a raised hand. All right, perfect. So if you're done with me, I will turn it over to Jennifer. And so Jennifer is one of my colleagues in the firm, and she specializes in municipal finance work. So she's very involved when our public agency clients go out and get a bond and all the supplemental stuff that goes along with that, including a citizens oversight committee like this committee. So she's going to give you some of the rules of the road on that aspect of it.
Thanks, Noelle. Good evening, everyone. Glad to meet you all. Rosie, did you say you were going to share your screen for mine, or how
Yeah, either way, if I can do it or you can do it, what would you prefer?
if you've got it up, go for it. I've got a bunch of screens. I'll let you run the show. It might be easier.
Sure.
And I'll just say next. Perfect. I'll just say next slide.
Fantastic.
But yeah, she's getting set up. Just good evening, everybody, and
All
great to
right.
meet you.
Do you see it on your end? Yes.
Yeah,
Okay.
perfect. So as Noelle said, I'm gonna go over just some of the roles and responsibilities of being on a bond oversight committee, and kind of what you can do, what you can't do, and some of the groundwork for you guys there. You can do next slide. So this is our agenda. So we'll briefly talk about Measure N, the project list, the purpose of the committee, your responsibilities as being a committee member, and then just district support, the type of support that the district will offer you. And I just want to reiterate as well, as Steve and Noelle said, this is an important civic function, and it's because of community members like you guys who give your time that this is possible. So thank you all. I know you've been thanked 3 times now, but thank you very much. Next slide, we can go. So Measure N. So as you know, at the March 5th, 2024 election, Measure N was put on the ballot, and it's a general obligation bond proposition, and it was approved by the voters. So it authorized the district to issue up to $116 million in general obligation bonds. And general obligation bonds are bonds that are secured by ad valorem property taxes in the district. So it's not a general fund, liability of the district. It's paid back by taxpayer money. And as I said, the bond measure did require voter approval. There's a 2/3 voter approval requirement for a general obligation bond. And you all should have in your packet that I believe Rosie gave you. One of the items is the resolution of the board of directors of the district ordering that election to authorize the issuance of those general obligation bonds. And I believe it's in section 1. You'll see that there's the proposition is listed and the list of all of the projects that have been authorized by Measure N. Sorry, I realized there was a typo when I was loading this up. It's Measure N, not O. Get my alphabet correct. But if you look at section 1, it'll lay out the summary statement, the short summary statement that was on the ballot, and also the full text of the ballot measure, which lays out all of the projects that are authorized to be financed with the bonds. And so you'll also see in that resolution that the Measure N also required the creation of this.
I have a question.
Oh, yes.
I'm a little lost here. What you talking about?
The very first section right there is the resolution with the ballot language.
There's pages, okay.
Did that help?
Okay, got it.
Okay. Yeah, sorry about that. I thought I heard somebody saying something. So you'll also see, I think it's maybe in section 3, don't quote me on that, but you'll see that the district's measure also promised to voters that they would create this committee, this Citizens Oversight Committee. And so it actually isn't required for a hospital or a healthcare district to have a Citizens Oversight Committee, like it is for other agencies like a school district. You'll see in the education code, when school districts go out for general obligation bonds, it's a statutory requirement that they have a bond oversight committee, and therefore there's actually a little bit more stringent rules about how the committee operates if you're a school district oversight committee. Here, the district actually decided and kind of self-imposed that requirement as a promise to the voters to have a committee, to have this committee, do some oversight and ensure that the expenditure of bond proceeds was as voted on by the voters. Next slide, please. So now we'll go over the project list. You can jump to the next slide too. And so as I was saying, you'll see in that resolution what we call the project list. And it's in the full text of the bond measure, and it's seen as a contract with the voters. That whole text of the full ballot language is seen as a contract with that agency, with its voters. And this bond measure, Measure N, included a list of projects that are allowed to be paid for with bond proceeds. And so the project list, what it is an entire universe of allowable expenditures. So any or all of these items that are listed there can be paid for with bond proceeds. But what the project list is it's not a to-do list, and it's not listed in order of priority. So all of the items that are listed there do not have to be accomplished or constructed with bond proceeds. It's simply a universe of all of the allowable things that the bond proceeds can pay for. So I always think that's an important thing for me to let my committee members know, that there might be 25 projects on a project list, and maybe only 2 of them are going to get done with bond proceeds. So just something to know, this is kind of more of a everything we can do as opposed to everything we have to do. Next slide, please. We can jump to the next one. So really back up one. Perfect. So the purpose, you can go down one more to slide 9. So the purpose for of the real job that you guys have is to inform and advise the public and then review and report on the expenditures of the bond proceeds. And what the real crux of what you're doing is advising the public as to whether those expenditures were consistent with the project list. Again, not that everything on the project list was done, but were the expenditures that were spent listed in that project list? Did the voters say, yes, you can spend bond proceeds on that project? Next slide. And so some of your roles and responsibilities, you can jump one more slide too, Rosie, thank you. So really, as I said, your main purpose is to inform the public about the expenditure of bond proceeds. And so there's certain activities that the committee can do, such as you're going to kind of actively review and report on what the money was spent on for Measure N and whether it was an approved, a voter approved project under Measure N. And you're also going to ensure that the proceeds are only expended for purposes that were described in the measure, right? If the measure said we're going to build a hospital and you're seeing expenditures, going to something that's not building a hospital, that's something that you guys are going to advise the public on and the board as well. And so this committee, you guys will have bylaws. Those were included in the packet that Rosie gave you as well. And I would suggest giving it a good read through. It's not too long of a read, but it's really going to give you guys the lay of the land of how the committee is going to operate. You guys are, the committee itself is no less than 5, no more than 7 members. You're going to have 2 meetings each year. And you can serve 2 2-year terms and no more than 2 consecutive terms. We'll get there. The terms are a little different for the very first meeting because we do need to stagger them so not everybody is falling off of their terms at the same time. But that's generally what you'll see in the bylaws as to the makeup and kind of tenure of the committee. And so some of the things that you will all be doing is receiving and reviewing copies of the district's audited financial report. And I think the bylaws say by April 1st, you'll get a copy of the district's audited financial report for you guys to review and comment on. If there were any deferred maintenance plans also that the district board decided to vote on and approve, you guys have the right to get a copy of that so you can review it as well. If there's any efforts that the district board decides to take to maximize bond proceeds by implementing, various cost-saving measures, you also have the right to review any of those efforts and comment on them. And then you also obviously have the right to receive from the board responses to any and all findings that the committee makes, or any recommendations you make, or any concerns that you have, say you do have a concern about a certain expenditure, or you do want to say, hey, we'd like to know a little bit more about this expenditure, exactly what part of the project did it pay for. You all will be have the ability to receive, from board and staff members, from Steve or Rosie or whoever, any responses that you guys ask, any that you ask for. Separately, I will say things that are not in the committee scope, and this is kind of one of the areas that I think is important to remember, because everything that I just said is really the universe of the subject matter jurisdiction of the committee. So things that are not within the committee's scope are things like determining how the bond funds are spent, or determining the priority of projects, right? Say there's 25 projects. The elected officials on the board of the district are the elected officials who get to decide priority of projects. They get to decide how those bond funds are spent, so long as they're done within the confines of Measure N. Another item that's not within the committee's scope are things like the bidding process. There's complex public agency bidding rules when the district's going to go out for, to bid for the construction of the project, the design of the project. All of that bidding process and the selection of contractors, none of that is within the purview of this committee. That sits with the elected officials on the board. So I do see, that's usually where the committee, you'll start to see people say, hey, why did you select that contractor? We want to talk about it at our meeting. That can't be agendized for the committee meeting. That's not within your subject matter jurisdiction. And so that is not something that this committee can deliberate on or take any action on. I do like to point out, though, however, that as Noel said, you don't lose your First Amendment rights as a member of the public, right? So if you don't like how they did their bidding process, or you want to make a public comment on a selection of contractors, you can always go to a public meeting of the district as a member of the public, as Noel said, not speaking for the committee, but as a member of the public. And I always encourage committee members, you know, if you've got an item that isn't within your jurisdiction, and really the jurisdiction is what were the expenditures and does it match what the voters approved, right? That's kind of your universe of jurisdiction. If you want to comment on something else, please feel free to go as a member of the public and have your voice heard on any of the items on the agenda. But again, make it clear you're not speaking for the committee as a whole. Next slide. Oh, did somebody have a question? Okay. Ray, is your hand up? Did you have a question?
I do have a question. Just in terms of the ballot measure language, it's clear on certain aspects of expenditures and proceeds, but it stays silent on interest-bearing dollars as it relates to the actual ballot measure or bond measure dollars in its use. The reason I ask is obviously HR 1 implications and how that might play into spending, and, you know, understanding the purview of this committee, you know, to advise and or to understand, you know, maybe some board decisions relating to that. But, you know, because it stays silent on the interest bearing component of any of those dollars, there could be an opportunity, and that's just a question maybe for Steve later on, pertaining to being able to use some of those funds, not spending them as fast or as quickly as we need to use some of the interest bearing to, you know, support some of the things that we're going to need. But it's pretty clear that you can't actually use the principal on operations, but it's silent on the interest bearing component.
Yeah, interesting question. So what he's asking about is when you do have bond proceeds, they sit in accounts that sometimes can earn interest. There's two components here. I won't get into the tax component too much, but for state law, investment earnings are not considered bond proceeds. So they do fall outside of the purview of the committee. But I will say for federal tax law, there are strict requirements on how investment earnings of tax exempt, which is most likely how these bonds will be issued as you go through that up to $116 million. There are strict federal tax law requirements if the bonds are issued as tax exempt on how those investment earnings is what they're called, on how those are spent. So you will see, you know, if the bond documents, the indenture, those kind of things as bonds are issued, you will see those talk about the limitations on how investment earnings are spent. But the principal amount, that up to $116 million is what you all will be looking at. Did that help, Ray? I know that
it does, but it adds further questions to Steve, but I'll wait for those after, because we want to be prompt on time tonight. So thank you.
Sure. Yeah, no problem. And again, if there's, you know, I'm talking about just on the bond proceeds, you know, if there's other there, just to kind of to go off of what Ray just said, you know, many projects are paid for with other sources of funds, not just bond proceeds. You may have the hospital built with bond proceeds, general fund proceeds, donations, you know, a whole host of items that may be paying kind of buckets of money that are coming in to pay for a project. And so if there are multiple buckets of money that are paying for a project, just know that those other buckets that are not bond proceeds are not within the purview of the committee to review, comment on, or even agendize about. So if there's donation money that's coming in and maybe there's interest earnings being earned on that, that's not going to be something that the committee gets to deliberate on or agendize about. So that's something to think about too, if there's other buckets of money coming in. Okay. And so lastly, so district support. So you will see in the bylaws that the district staff has been authorized and directed to provide the committee with any necessary technical or administrative assistance. And I'm sure you've already seen that, right? Rosie has put together the packet. Steve worked with her to get the items on the agenda. And that was all sent out to you guys. But so they're going to be helping you with each meeting, getting your agenda together, all of that, even technical assistance, having us here, right? Providing that assistance to you guys to understand the Brown Act and what your roles and responsibilities are. And you'll see it coming up, in addition to helping you guys with the agenda. If you guys have any questions or, anything like that, staff has been authorized to help you all. So don't feel like you're in this alone. Staff will be here for you guys. When you do your annual report, staff can help you. You can kind of get them the draft. They can put it together for you, those kind of things. And so really it's just to make sure that you guys have the sufficient resources that you need to make all of the findings, put together your annual report, which is going to have a statement of whether the district is in compliance with what the voters voted on and on their expenditures. And then it's going to give a summary of all of the activities that the committee did since the last report. Usually it's just kind of an overview of the meetings and the things you discussed. In fact, I recommended to Rosie, and I usually recommend to all of my committees, that on each of the agenda, this will tend to help. On each agenda, you can have an item to discuss what items you think are important to put in the annual report that you all do. And so, that will kind of help you when you go to put the annual report. You're not starting from scratch. You can go to the minute meetings of that meeting and say, okay, for the 2 meetings this year, we kind of gave a summary of all of the important items that we discussed and the activities that we did. If you guys took a tour of, any facilities or something like that, you can throw that in there as well. And that way it kind of helps you very quickly put together your annual report to the board. So with that, any other questions? That's the end of my boring you to death.
I have a question. It kind of goes back to the interest earnings. So if I understand it right, you're saying that the interest earnings do not need to be spent on the list of projects that are in the resolution of the page.
If they're bond proceeds, technically under state law, the investment earnings can be spent on other projects, but because of the limitations of federal tax law, because they do have to be spent on governmental capital projects, you will find that most likely investment earnings do tend to be spent on the projects of that bond measure. So it's I don't want to say it's rare, but you will most likely find, because of the federal tax law limitations on how those funds can be spent, that they most likely do get funneled back into the project.
Yeah, that's what I'm accustomed to, and it helps that they have to be at least spent on other capital projects.
Yeah.
Rather than operating expenses, because
Yeah.
hypothetical scenario is you issue the bonds and you let them sit there for a little bit and wait with investing or wait with projects, but meanwhile, cost goes up and interest is improving, so, okay.
Yeah, and there's also, I won't go into, I could talk your ear off for hours on federal tax law of municipal bonds, but I will tell you that there's also spending limitations on it's called arbitrage. There's spending limits and arbitrage limitations. So you can't issue municipal bonds and then go invest them in higher interest, what they call material or higher interest earning accounts. In order to take advantage of the tax exempt nature of the bonds. It's, the tax exempt status of the bonds is really considered a subsidy from the federal government. And so you can't issue bonds and then have them sit there for 10 years. There's expenditure. You have to spend bond proceeds in a very specific time frame, because they do not want over issuances happening. They do not want tax exempt subsidies flooding the market. So you can't issue bonds, way ahead of a project and have them sit there and earn interest. And there's also there's certain temporary periods of when you can earn interest, but interest is very limited with bond proceeds under federal tax law. I'll kind of lump it into that. Anything else?
Any questions from anyone for clarification purposes? Okay, seeing none, I'm also gonna ask if there's any public comment on the items. No,
No, yeah, no, mine.
okay. So if no one has any questions or comments, we're gonna move to item 4, which is assignment of leadership terms. Committee members will draw for selection of initial terms on the committee. The draw.
Can you give anything you'd like to speak on this?
Well, I can read the, what I thought I'd do is just read the paragraph in the bylaws of the committee, to describe what it is we're about to do. So in the paragraph called term, it indicates that each member shall serve a term of 2 years, commencing as of the date of appointment by the board. No member shall serve more than 2 consecutive terms. At the committee's first meeting today, members will draw lots to select a minimum of 2 members to serve for an initial 1-year term, and the remaining members for an initial 2-year term, so that the terms of all members would not expire at the same time. So that's what we're doing here. You've got lots of some sort, no triple recording. So,
I thought there was candy in that.
Sorry.
Goodies, bribes.
What have you got
Oh
there?
my gosh, I got a whole amp. Wait. Oh, I know.
That one? That's good.
Wow.
All right, this one will be raised.
that's raised, okay. So,
Now we start
yeah,
with,
go for it, Rosie. Have-
with
you wanna
Julie.
call
Would you
anybody
like
out?
to go first?
Sure, I have a 2-year.
Thank you.
I have 1 year.
Thank you.
1 year.
2 year.
Thank you.
2,
And Ray, you also have a 2 as well. Ray may not hear us, but there we have it.
So that's the initial term for each member, and then they can serve 2 terms, so they're second
Correct, so.
2-year term forever.
Correct,
Right.
so to add a little more to that, I believe this is an item that we will discuss at the meeting in November as well. I guess we can have that discussion now as to when we would be doing a call for committee applicants, so to speak, and, you know, any comments if they would like to run for a second, run, be considered for a second. Because the district board will select placements for the next term, for the 1-year term members. So Fred and Butch, if you would like to run for a second term in the spring, we will, will come to you and ask if you want to be considered again. And we'll go from there.
So just a question then, so the spring is when the term technically would expire?
It would expire a year from today, but there'll be time if neither one of them wants to serve or for any
Okay.
reason we want to do a call for more.
It like we did
candidates,
in the spring?
it will require some lead time,
Takes a few months.
yeah.
Okay, any other questions in the committee? And, then any public comments on the item?
No hands on line.
Okay, item 5 is update of project and expenditures. Staff report and presentation on expenditures of Measure N bond proceeds and Measure N project status. And that's Jessica.
Yeah. I was gonna say, in the back of your folders, you'll find the financial. Yes, that's, I can as well. I'll take me a little bit. You may go ahead. Okay.
So, what was included in your packet was just a very high-level summary of the earnings and the use of the proceeds for calendar year 2024 and 2025. We received just over 55 million in, funds from the sale of the bonds, and immediately that was parsed out between, 6 different accounts. You'll see 3 here, but there's a taxable and a non-taxable account for each of these subgroups. The project fund, the capitalized interest fund, which is meant to pay the first year of any interest or principal. And then the cost of issuance fund, which is meant to be used to reimburse the district for the expense of issuing the bonds. So in 2024, we spent almost 654,000 on the cost of issuing the bonds. That is for the consultants and legal fees that are involved with that endeavor. And then shortly thereafter, we spent about 40,475,000 on the purchase of the property from NPT. So that included legal fees associated with the purchase as well. And then, as we were discussing earlier, of course, there are interest dividends that are earned on the bonds that have not been expended yet, that are in the bank accounts. And for 2024, we earned just a little over 373,000 in interest. And each account holds the interest earned in those specific 6 accounts. The cost of issuance fund, at the beginning of 2025 had almost 110,000 in the fund. At some point, that fund will be closed and those funds will be moved to the project fund. So we began 2025 with 11.5 million in the project fund.
Scroll to the 2025 page.
In 2025, we used 1.3 million from the capitalized interest fund to pay the first interest payment on the bonds that were issued. There was a little bit more that we expended on the property purchase for legal fees. There was some building signage that we replaced with our new logo. And also some funds were expended on an LED project, which is meant to save some utility expenses in the future. And then to date, through the end of July 31st, we've earned $306,000 in interest. And that is all I have on that.
And I think, can I give an update on some of the other projects that we're working on, we haven't necessarily spent the dollars on yet? The 2 main ones are the radiology work, so the MRI scanner and the CT scanner. We have received board approval for the purchase of those scanners through Philips. And we're working right now on the construction design, because there's construction work that needs to happen to get rid of the old MRI machine and bring in a new one. These are fixtures to the building, right? These like take up a whole room, bolted to the ground, and you gotta like remove a wall to get an old one out and get a new one in. So the construction phase is in progress right now. We haven't started the construction, but the design work is happening right now. So probably in the early 2026 meeting that we have, we'll have a lot more progress on that towards actually having those installed. That was a big part of the measure and campaign, was talking about those. So we're excited about those getting going. Second of the 3 that we're working on that are not up here is looking at solar. So looking, we talked in the bond measure about green energy projects, so one of them is already underway, and it's nearly done, and that's replacing all our old lighting with LEDs. The other one that we're looking at, different financing options for right now is the solar project. So how much solar can we put on this campus? We've identified a number of areas on the roof of the single-story medical office building, as well as some space out on the campus. We might be able to save about 40, 45, 50% of our electricity bills, which is gonna be roughly $1 million a year of savings, when we get that fully up and running. But there's a lot of changes to the federal rules around that right now that we're kicking around. The latest Trump bills have not been super friendly to green energy projects, so that changes the calculus a little bit around some of those things. So we're working on that one. We've got a local consultant who's helping us with that one. And then the third one, and was also a huge part of the Measure N campaign, is the emergency department redesign. So we are working with an architect to look at different designs of what the emergency department might look like in its expanded capacity. We do want to nearly double the capacity of the emergency department as part of the bond funds. So that we'll have some expenses for that in 2025. The bulk of that project will really be the construction of it, which will be in the second tranche of bond proceeds that we receive. So we'll complete the design phase for the emergency department. That will give us a sense of how much the emergency department redesign will cost, which will then tell us how much do we go back to the bond market for our second tranche of bond dollars. So those are the three big areas that we haven't spent the money on yet, that you won't see up here, but that we're really working on.
MRI, CT, and solar. Are those the three projects you're talking about?
I lumped MRI and CT together, so MRI and CT as one, solar, and then the emergency department.
I'm curious on the building purchase.
Yeah,
Is it the whole campus? So is this building included
correct.
as well? Okay.
Yes,
I
yes.
didn't know if it was just across the street.
Yeah,
there.
so the district now owns the whole property, which is 26 acres. Which includes this building and the hospital, which is 85 Nielsen, and the hospital, which is 75 Nielsen, and the medical office building, which is 45 and 65 Nielsen. I don't know why they skipped 55.
Future building.
You're right, so, yeah.
Any other questions?
Yeah, I got a few questions. So over which time period are you asking us to have an opinion or a review or whatnot? Is it just calendar year 24? Is it all the way through July of 25?
Yeah, good
What's the
question.
time period?
So then, we have a future agenda item here, it's actually the next agenda item, which is about the annual report. And so that one will just be on the 24.
Okay.
So we'll come together and do an annual report on the 2024 expenditures. The 2025 update that Jessica wanted to give you was really just kind of a progress report.
No, I appreciate that.
Yeah.
Definitely. The other question is, or maybe the suggestion is maybe there's a couple items in there that are not in our purview, the way I understand the training, and that's the capitalized interest and then also the bond in P&I payments. Those are not really our purview.
I believe that was listed in the use of the funds.
Can't hear you,
I'm
miss.
sorry, I believe that was listed in the list of projects in the bond, statement.
Jennifer, maybe you can help with,
For the principal and interest.
The capitalized interest of the first year, because it was gonna take some time to,
That goes-
initiate the district taxes.
Yeah, that goes towards the, that has to go towards principal and interest.
Yeah,
What-
but for the first year. What was the bond language?
Yeah, was the question about why is there a interest payment showing up on expenditures of
Correct.
bond proceeds?
Correct.
Yeah, so you'll see, so one of the allowable uses of bond proceeds, and it's for a very short window, but you can pay for capitalized interest from bond proceeds. Typically, it's either because bonds are issued outside of a window where the county can levy the taxes in time. Sometimes the project during a construction period. There's some certain legal requirements around capitalized interest being used during a construction period. So you will see that drop off. The non-capitalized interest bond interest payments will not, moving forward, will not be included in here unless they were paid out of capitalized interest. And there's a very short window they can do that. So those will start to drop off, if that makes sense.
Yeah, so once it's paid via the tax levy, then that part drops out. is what you're saying.
Correct.
Okay, that makes sense. Okay, and then, do we get to see any closing statements for the acquisition or invoices, or how do we verify that or review these amounts and these numbers?
Sounded from the presentation like you're allowed to request additional details or information for documentation. So if that's something that you wanted to view.
Yeah, and I think moving forward, as you guys kind of develop, if that's something you want, Rosie, you can put together, and I know it's a little extra staff work, but I think it would be helpful, maybe to have the breakout show kind of a detailed list of the name of the person who was paid, the date they were paid, how much they were paid, and the type of work or the project that it went towards. If it was for LED lighting or signage or design work from an architect or something like that. If that would help the committee, that would be, perfectly acceptable. I know it's a little extra staff work, but I think that would be great.
And would that be applicable to the past years, so 2024 in arrears and the progress?
Anything
Okay.
anything
Everything.
we put a name under, right?
Right.
So I would like to definitely see the uses and the sources and uses of funds for the bond issuance, which will show these numbers at the top. Also, the closing statement for the property purchase and the authorizations for, and because we're just talking about 24, right? We're not talking about the preview for 25.
Okay, sure. So you're talking about 24.
And then, interest and dividends earned, the backup for that. Just, the cost of issuance as well, basically every line item. Sorry. Not sorry. But if I'm gonna put my name on it, I don't see those.
I have to agree with, Stephen, Stefan. Yeah, I agree with Stefan. Normally an appropriations committee usually works before you're asking for appropriation for a fund before anything is
That's not
purchased.
what this
This
is.
particular group is being asked to approve something that's already been purchased.
Yeah,
Or
and
going to be purchased. Consequently, if that's the case, then I have to agree with Stefan, is that I'd like to see where the funds actually and what the costs were, and things like that.
yeah, and just I missed a little bit of it, but just so it's not an appropriations committee, so you guys don't get to approve ahead of time any of these expenditures. You're always looking in the arrears. You're always looking at only bond funds that had already been expended. So you're never going to be seeing anything forward looking. You're always going to be looking in the arrears at things that were already approved by the district's board for expenditures. If I heard the question right.
Basically a light version of an audit.
I missed that. I'm
Well,
sorry.
basically a light version of an audit.
I didn't hear that. I'm so sorry.
Well, do we want to just go ahead and move to item 6? Because we're going to be talking about what we want to see in the annual report. Is this relevant to that?
I have a quick question actually for you, Jennifer, on this item. Do we need to take a vote to approve the 2024? Tonight?
No, there's no approvals. This is just a simply informational item every meeting.
Perfect.
Yeah, for the committee to see what was expended and where it went. Yep.
Thank you.
Let's go ahead.
I don't even know if this is an appropriate question, or I'm a little concerned. Has anybody on this committee been on a compliance committee before?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And if so, if someone were to see or suspected non-compliance, then what?
And that goes into the report to the board.
You mean like if you found an expenditure that you did not think was part of the project list that was approved by the voters?
Right. That-
Yeah, yeah,
It
you,
just goes back to the board?
yeah, usually what they will do is the chair, typically the chair of the board, if there's something like that that needs to be voiced out in the public to the board, so the public and the board can hear it, you would send the chair of the board, Ray, assuming he, you know, was the chair at the time, you would send him, you would have a discussion, you would, you know, you could have your agenda item about the expenditures. You guys would then discuss it if someone brought up, hey, I don't think this is that, we want more information from staff, or we want to talk to the board directly. You would send the chair to the board meeting to say, hey, public and the board, we have an expenditure that we do not think falls within the purview of Measure N. We want to alert the board to it. We want to alert the public to it. And we want maybe ask the board to agendize that topic the next time. So you guys can either get down to the bottom of it, whether they need to, reimburse the project account and can't use bond funds on that expenditure.
Perfect, thank you.
Yeah, of course.
And maybe I'm going a little bit too fast, but I would think that our report should be on the board agenda no matter what, whether it's good, bad, or indifferent. Could be on consent if it's good, but at least that way it becomes part of the public record.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
The public can see that we've done our job, that we exist, and that we look at things.
Yes.
I think that's also the board's best interest.
That's correct. Yeah, absolutely. That's my expectation.
Yeah, and typically the board every year will review and accept your annual reports. There's really no action taken on it. But if something like that would happen where an expenditure came up, I'm talking about the next board meeting, right? Not waiting for your annual report to come out, but having the chair go to the next board meeting to alert the public and the board of the possible discrepancy that you've discovered.
Okay, let's just go ahead and check if there's any public comment for this item. Any public comment for this
No
item?
hand. Yeah, double check. I don't think there's any online now. No hands online.
Nope.
Nope.
Okay. So let's go ahead and move on to item 6, which is discussion of items for the annual report. We need to consider items to be included. And it looks like we have some items that we want included from the last discussion.
Yes,
About detail.
I can start a running list.
Okay.
So we'll put on the 2024 expenditure. Right?
Yep.
Correct.
And we're going to require.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
I mean, is there a format that's being presented to the board that can be shared with the
Yes.
committee? So that
Yeah.
people aren't having to redo a bunch of work.
Yeah, good question. So what we, in talking with council ahead of time, would recommend to this committee is that this committee select and appoint an ad hoc committee. So that would be 3 of the 6 members of this committee to actually be the ones to write the annual report. So we get together and get to be able to get together in larger detail, not have to be, publicly with the sort of the rigors of this meeting that we're going through, right, with all of the motions and everything, but just to sit down with Rosie to go through and create and write the annual report for this committee to bring to the full board. And we have a handful of examples from other similar committees and districts that can be used as templates.
And how will the full committee then get behind the report? It's half the committee writes it, the other half.
Yeah, so I would expect that the ad hoc committee would work on it, workshop it, write it, and then bring it to this committee. And then this committee would, as a full committee, bless it and then bring it to the board. Is that what would happen?
Sounds right, however, yeah, so.
Yeah.
so
That would be a
Jennifer-
third meeting.
Yeah, so Jennifer, that would mean that we have to have all of our annual report items decided tonight, along with the ad hoc form, do the work and bring it back to our early November meeting that we're looking to put together. And then we'll take it to the board at our district board December meeting. So are we gonna be able to come up with all those topics tonight though, or do you think it might take tonight's meeting and the November meeting to really put together that list of
Yeah,
topics.
it's typically the board. Yeah, typically the board will be receiving the annual report a little bit later on. Again, it's kind of something done in the arrears. So for your 2025 meetings, you know, for this meeting, you will say, okay, you know, the items that you're gonna, you know, say you want to say, okay, we got a presentation from legal counsel on the Brown Act and our roles and responsibilities, because really what it is your annual report is a summary of what you guys did and then a statement of whether or not they are in compliance with their expenditure requirements under the measure. So usually I'll see a committee say, okay, well, let's write down and make sure we remember to put in our committee that at our August 25th meeting, we got presentations from legal counsel on X, Y, and Z. We appointed the chair and the vice chair were appointed. You know, we had a discussion on how we want to see the expenditures laid out for us. So it makes it, you know, our job easier on our oversight responsibilities. And, you know, then we discussed the items for the annual report. That's typically how we'll see kind of this agenda item go. And then what will happen is the ad hoc committee will usually meet after that second meeting. So maybe even in January, they'll meet. They'll put together, you know, kind of all of the items from the two meetings, write it together in a, you know, couple page report, bring it back to the board. You guys will get the draft report ahead of time so you guys can review. And then the chair, you know, that every, you know, maybe at the next meeting, you know, you guys will have an agenda item to review and approve your annual report. You guys can comment and say, hey, we want this to be in there. We don't want that in there. There's a typo here, all of those things. Then staff can finalize it, and then at the next meeting, it will be reviewed and approved, or reviewed and by the board, the district's board. So it's a little bit, it's everything's kind of done in the arrears because it's going to be really impossible for you guys to get it done. If you want to try to get it done in December and have high hopes, you know, go for it, but it would be perfectly fine to do it in January or February because the holidays get really tough. It's very common.
Okay, so thank you for that timeline, Jennifer. That question thing got a little further than I had expected. So we would want to capture both of this year's meeting in the annual report. So that would be August and November. And so then the ad hoc committee would get together after November, maybe in January, as you mentioned. And then we would need maybe a full committee meeting in March, April to approve that report out and then take it to the district.
Yep,
Does that sound right?
exactly. Yep, that sounds about right. Because I know this one's a little truncated because of the timing of the issuance of bonds and forming of the committee. We have these meetings very close to each other, but that sounds, you know, more of a, as you move forward, a great timeline.
The cadence will get better as we get out of the first year where we're not starting until August.
Yeah, there's always bumps along the road the first year because it's of just the timing of things.
Yeah, okay, thank you for that.
Question about timing, it, sounds like meetings are 2 months apart. As opposed to just
Well,
digging in and doing it like a month apart and making sure
the bylaws require us to have a minimum of 2 a year. So if we want to get our 2 in for the year, today and spacing them out, early November sounded right, could be early December, I suppose. Working around the holidays, but to get the 2 in for this year, they're a little close together. So then we have our first one for 26 in March, April, something like that timeframe. It's not just their approval of the annual report that would be on that agenda. We have other items on the agenda, other standard business items on the agenda as well, I would expect.
you want to close the books yet, so that's.
Sorry?
You will not have closed the books for 25 yet, so that won't.
So no, so we would not, so if we did our meeting in May, we could look at 25 years, we should have our audit.
The audit is usually done by
April.
the April board meeting.
So if we had our meetings in maybe in May instead of March, then we could tackle a few things. We could complete our 2025 report out and look at 2025 financials.
That would be, you read my mind. I was going to say, make that first meeting whenever you guys will think you'll have your audited report for them to review, and that will be on the agenda. And yeah, that's great.
It's gonna be more than a year old. I mean, it's gonna be 2 years old.
Year and a half old, 24,
That's how the audits work.
Yeah, for that committee report out, is that much, that's pretty standard, Jennifer?
Yeah, I have some committees that some only have 1 a year and their reports are a year and a half old, which is why which is why you are getting these kind of updates as you go. And so if there was something, your annual report is just kind of a look back on the previous year. But if there was something that came up, you know, in that May meeting, we'll call it May, that you said, hey, red flag, there's a problem here. That's why I'm saying you would send your chair to the May board meeting. So it's not that you're waiting until your annual report to bring up any issues. It's just your annual report is kind of just, it is what it is. It's your annual report. If there's other issues, you would usually send your chair to the next board meeting and not wait for your annual report to come out. Your annual report, though, would capture that you guys had a discrepancy or sent, you know, the chair to discuss X, Y, or Z to the board or something like that. And then state whether or not you found them to be in compliance with the bond measure.
Okay.
So we're talking about 24 and 25 annual report being issued.
Two
in
separate
spring.
pieces. So 2024 report out, and then the 2025 audited financials.
Okay,
And then, so that 2024 report out that the committee approves in May would then go to the district in maybe June.
Okay.
And then by the end of 25, or sorry,
26.
January 26th, maybe January 27th, that's when the committee would get together ad hoc to write the report for 2020. Yeah.
Send me a step by line.
Okay,
That's very.
So they're about a year. Once we get on a cadence, they'll be close to a year
Years.
apart.
well, I think from what I'm hearing, is just the level, a little bit more level of detail in the updates that we get in the meetings would be helpful, so that when we get to the annual report, we know where those numbers came from. And that's why I was saying, if there's a format that's already being used and being presented on how these funds are being spent on the district side or on the hospital side, then, you know,
I don't think I put anything together for this.
more than just what's listed here.
I mean, we have our own internal tracking sheets and have a lot more detail on them, right, than what was presented here. Where I was asked to put together a high level summary of where the bonds were spent, and then both can ask me for more detail, and I'm happy to provide it.
More details in the future, I mean, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah,
But
my suggestion on the details would be name of the vendor or the company, date they were paid, amount they were paid, and what they were paid for doing. I think that'll provide you guys the detail that you're looking for and allow you to feel good about your oversight.
do we have a list for 24?
For our annual report. So it sounds like, so we want to form an ad hoc to come together after this year is done to write this report in January. So I'll start the list that we have so far. So it is the, you know, it's the activity. So it's really just the items that were on today's agenda. Like that's the activity of the committee. Right?
But I was asking about the financial backup for.
Oh, yeah. So I'm sorry. Are you saying to put that on the agenda for next meeting?
Yeah, so we can
With the
discuss
details,
it and review
yeah.
that.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I had
but can you read that list back? So we all on the same page?
yeah. So what I have for, are you talking for an agenda for the next meeting?
On the,
Annual report items.
on the,
Well, it really is the activity that we have done so far for this meeting, and then it'll be the activities we've done in the November meeting. That's what we'll call the annual report out. But for the financial, like, so I guess Jennifer, maybe need a little clarification on this. For this financial detail breakdown that y'all want to see, that would be on our agenda for our November meeting to come back with that with detail,
Yeah,
correct,
right? So two different things.
right, but I just want to make sure we both have the same list in mind for
Okay.
those financial details.
Okay, so vendor, Jennifer, go through your list again, because our internet's bad today and it keeps cutting out. So I heard you say vendor and what else?
Sure. Name a vendor. My suggestions would be name a vendor, date they were paid, amount they were paid, and what they were paid for doing. You know, if it's an architect, you can say design work. If it's to purchase materials, it's purchase of, you know, materials or, you know, construction, you know, something like that.
Is
Purchase.
that what you were referring to?
That, and then also the sources and uses of funds for the bond issuance
Okay,
and the
sorry,
closing,
repeat that last part again.
sources and uses of funds
sources and uses of funds for the bond interest.
For the bond issuance.
Bond interest, sorry. Okay,
And then also, for the property purchase, I mean, there'll be a whole list of vendors and lawyers and all sorts of other things, but definitely the closing statement, the closing escrow statement.
Okay.
And the corresponding board report and approval from the board to do that acquisition. That makes sense.
And if there's anything, just so you know, if there's anything in the closing statement, bank account numbers, run that by Noel. There's certain things that might need to be redacted, like if they were given out on a public records request. So just, you know, run that by. There might be some like banking information of the other parties and of the district that might need to be redacted.
okay. Thank you. Okay, got it.
Thank you.
Thank you. So that will be an agenda item for November. Come back with that detail and scale requested. Yes?
Yes.
Okay, fantastic.
Anyone else
Okay.
have a question or?
I do. So you mentioned that you've got some samples of other committee reports from other similar bond oversight committees. Would it be possible to either get a link to those or get a copy of them so we can be thinking, oh, wow, we should include that before our next meeting?
Yes,
In the meeting materials, maybe?
yes, it's more of a way in which the information that we have on our agendas and the topics that we have discussed are communicated. So really, we can't put anything on there that we haven't addressed, right? So,
Right,
correct,
so-
Jennifer, it's all agenda items, all topics that we have discussed in the committee that would be going on this annual report, correct?
Yeah, correct. And you sure those other committee reports, they're public documents that they, you know, give to their board in the public. So perfectly fine to see them. And you'll see, I'll give you a preview. I deal with a lot of bond oversight. A lot of them are, you know, the annual report itself is really just a summary. It's kind of, you know, at our XYZ date meeting, we did X, Y, and Z, and you guys can, you know, you'll vote on. Yeah, and then, you know,
Jennifer, I'm sorry. We're very unstable tonight. Sorry, Jennifer, our internet, we can barely hear what you're saying at this point. It's getting worse as we've gone. Yes, I will send you those examples. And then do we want to work on putting together an ad hoc today, or do we want to move that to next committee meeting as well? Because we're not going to get together between now and November, for the ad hoc anyway.
I would suggest next meeting.
Okay. Right, so maybe think about who we want to be on. Okay, thank you.
Okay, any public comment on item 6?
Ray's got his hand.
Oh, Ray?
I just wanted to share that I'm interested in joining in the report out and the for the yearly report and helping craft some highlights for the community.
Thank you. Thanks. Okay, item 6 is future meeting planning, date and time for next 2025 committee meeting. Future planning process and cadence for committee meetings in 2026.
We discussed a little bit about the timing of meetings in the fall and into next year. I have a few dates for November, but I don't expect everyone to have all their availability with them right now to say yes or no. So is it maybe best I send another one of those surveys to respond to online? We send that out tomorrow. I can tell you right now, I'm looking at November 3rd, 10th, or 13th. And if we want to consider early December, I can look for a date in there as well.
Can we do October?
October for our second meeting?
Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah, I have a granddaughter due the last week of October, first week of November, so if I attend, it would most likely be remotely.
Okay.
That's possible, if you guys pick those dates.
So sooner is better. Sounds like in October. Possibly, I guess maybe could come sooner, yeah. Yeah.
Depends.
It's gonna be hit or miss for everyone, I believe.
Yeah.
But a challenge. I will look for some dates in October as well, and maybe also one for one in early December.
Yeah, Okay,
So Rosie, are you like sending out emails to the committee members to get their feedback on dates?
Yeah.
Yeah, so just please, just keep an eye out for those and try to respond as quickly as possible so that they can find those times. So like November and then probably May.
Yeah.
For the next one, or October, November. And
Correct, and the committee, the ad hoc meeting, the ad hoc committee that comes out, we meet in between
between them.
the fall and
Yeah.
spring meeting.
Perfect.
does anyone have any questions?
I had a question then, through all of this, and when would we be receiving the information that Stefan was talking about?
At the next meeting,
At the next meeting?
be October, November, December,
Okay.
somewhere in there.
Okay. Okay, and any public comment? Greg? No, okay, hearing none, any other comments before we adjourn? No, okay, meeting adjourned.
Good job, Carolyn. Thank you for doing that.
Thanks, everyone.
Well, thanks, Jennifer.
Bye.
Thank you, Ryan, for.
I told myself I would look at.
Safe travel.